Today we're going to talk about 11 of my favorite books and some life lessons that I took away from them. Now, if you read the books, you'll probably find something different, or you may take away some of the same things or some different things. That's one of my favorite things about books, is when you read them, you can take away different things depending on where you are in your life. The first book is Titan, The Life of John D. Rockefeller. This is a very comprehensive book in my opinion. It's one of my favorites. I have a sentimental attachment to it. It was one of the first books I ever read, being dyslexic. But I loved it because it broke down his life from the very beginning, very humble beginnings, all the way through the rise. And I believe it even goes into the death of him. But it is a comprehensive book about his business, going from a private business to a public business. It also goes into some of his childhood stories, who really formed who he was, and his shrewdness. But it also taps into some of his charities that he did. He was a huge proponent of charity. He was also a big man of faith. He was a devout Baptist, and I think that really influenced who he was and how he approached life and how he viewed life. The life lesson that I took away from it was, regardless of your success, do hard shit. Second book is Man's Search for Meaning. This is a little less of a business book and more of just almost a documentary about a gentleman who was forced to go into the concentration camps under Adolf Hitler. And it's a really sobering book. The first half of the book talks about him in the concentration camps, and he reflects on the guards and how hard it was even for the guards that were there, and not in any way sympathizing with them or justifying anything like that. But it was interesting to hear a man's perspective, person's perspective, viewing how even the guards were struggling and trying to come to terms with the just atrocities that were being taken place during this time. The second half of the book talks about his life after the concentration camps. And for me, the biggest takeaway is that everybody has the potential for evil. The third book is Delivering Happiness. This is a great book. This was, for me, maybe a little bit more lighthearted book, especially coming after Man's Search for Meaning. It's a great book on customer service. It's a great book on a man's pursuit of building a business, eventually acquired by Amazon, I believe, if I remember correctly. And to me, the biggest takeaway being in the service business is how he prioritized the customer experience. And you'll notice some threads here. Later on, we'll talk about Steve Jobs, who also cares about customer experience. And it's just such an important thing. And he really breaks down some of the stories he tells. He seemed like a very kind, lighthearted man. And some of the stories really emphasize his passion and his desire to really serve the customer. And the big takeaway for this book is customer service is king. Fourth book is Am I Being Too Subtle? This is a book about Sam Zell. He started out very humble beginnings. He managed a couple rental properties in college, I believe it was, and really grew that into an empire. He took his real estate holdings public, which was one of the first companies to ever, or one of the first people to ever do that. It's just a fantastic book about innovation and thinking outside of the box and doing just really cool things and new things, specifically within the real estate market. I think one of the things that I took away from it was how quickly he moved and how blunt he was. And I love that. He said what he meant and meant what he said, and he just got things done. And he didn't waste time, kind of dancing around issues and being subtle, hence the name, Am I Being Too Subtle? My key takeaway from this is being direct is the most beneficial way of being productive and moving quickly. The fifth book is Steve Jobs. This is about his life. This is kind of a biography. And it's a really interesting book because it goes all the way, from the beginning, starting in a garage, through him getting fired from Apple, him starting other businesses, and then him coming back to Apple all the way to his death. Steve Jobs was a very unique person. I really enjoyed reading about him and learning about him. His products have so impacted my life. And it was interesting to watch, the ups and downs. A lot of people, you would look at it from the outside and it would be easy to say, well, he just, started Apple and kicked ass and did all these things. Well, he actually had a lot of trials. He got fired from Apple. He ended up coming back to Apple. He started Pixar. He did all kinds of things that really impact a lot of our lives today in entertainment and productivity. So the big takeaway for me in this book was to not give up on your dreams. Book number 6, The Dyslexic Advantage. So obviously we're talking about dyslexia a lot on this channel. And this was one of the early books that I read about dyslexia as I was really beginning to understand it. I read this book shortly after getting some Apple devices that helped me read. And it was interesting to read it. It was eye-opening to hear someone talk about it. In the area I grew up, there wasn't a lot of understanding of dyslexia. It was kind of a mystery in a lot of ways. And it was before, I think even YouTube was really popular, or at least it was before I was on YouTube a lot. So there just wasn't a lot of information out there about dyslexia. So this was great for me. It really gave me a lot of confidence and a lot of just passion to do more in life. And for me, the big takeaway is that dyslexia is not a disadvantage, but rather an advantage. The 7th book is The Ultimate Sales Machine. I like this book. It's a little sentimental to me. It was one of the books that I read over and over again when first moving to Colorado. Me and my son have a little joke. He thinks it's overrated. I think it's underrated, but he's only 17, so he still has a lot to learn. But The Ultimate Sales Machine, to me, it helped me lay out the systems that I needed to grow my business. And the author, he talks about it in the book. He talks about experiences. He goes on these rides with salespeople. It's kind of an old school sales book. Like he's talking about home shows and he's talking about selling vacuum cleaners and, pest control services. And it's a really kind of what they say, like a nut and bolt kind of, business that they're talking about in the book, which I like. A lot of the content that we listen to today can be, talking about how to sell stuff on eBay or Amazon or dropship or all this stuff. And this really broke down service businesses in a way that made it really easy for me to digest it. So the big takeaway in this book is you can't scale without good systems. Book number 8, On Trade Leadership. Now, I'm a big fan of Dave Ramsey. He helped me when I was young learn how to manage my finances in a better way. I was at kind of an impasse and didn't know what to do next with my personal finances. And I read one of his books and it really helped me. And so I've always been a big fan and super grateful for the services and type of personality that he is. This particular book, On Trade Leadership, doesn't specifically talk about personal finances. It talks about business. And generally, it just takes you from the beginning of his business all the way through. I think his catchphrase is, I'm gonna tell you how I started a business from a card table in my living room to a multi-million-dollar business. And it was just reaffirming to hear the processes. I'm like, okay, I'm kind of tracking with that or I'm not tracking with that. And it was just an insightful book. Now, my key takeaway is probably a little different than some others. He's a pretty devout Christian. I like to think that I'm a good Christian. And but the key takeaway for me was if people don't give a shit about what you're doing, they shouldn't be on your team. Book number 9, 12 Rules for Life, an antidote to chaos. I really love Jordan Peterson. I love the topics that he goes into. The rules, really all the rules are great. My son's favorite rule is be precise with your speech, which I think is a great rule. I actually use that a lot too. I'll tell you my favorite rule here in a minute. But this book is just a great book because of regardless of where you are in your kind of cycle of life, if you're young or old or in the middle, there's good takeaways. And whether it's, clean your room, that sounds like a very basic rule that is in the book, but the principle of that is scalable no matter where you are in life. And so it's really important. If you just read it at surface level, you're like, oh, whatever. If you actually ponder, if you meditate on the different aspects of the book, you'll find great insights and it'll help you become a better person, a better husband, a better father, a better son, a better daughter, a better mother. And so it's excellent book. And my big takeaway in the book is I always compared myself to a lot of other people and dealt with insecurity. But my favorite thing that I took away from the book was compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not to someone else's today. Book number 10 is Principles by Ray Dalio. This is a great book. I was introduced to this book by my older brother, and he was really impacted by this book. And I've learned a lot through him and by him in my life. And so I picked this book up and read it. It's a pretty thick read to me. It's read, for me, it's more like a textbook. It's very systematic, a lot of numbers, a lot of 1A, 1B, 1C. And so it's a book that is probably less conducive for reading an audio. And it's something that you probably want to maybe read a couple times and break down and make systems out of it. It's a great book. On the first part of the book is about business. The other part is about personal. And he breaks down different principles and decision-making processes. And the big takeaway for me is principles help you make decisions and keep you on track. The 11th book is The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss. Tim Ferriss is a fantastic author, podcaster, and this book is really great. In a lot of ways, it's kind of like the Dave Ramsey book, On Trade Leadership, but a little bit more tech savvy, a little bit more emphasis on the tech world. He breaks down businesses in his business for drop shipping in different e-commerce businesses. And so it took me a little while to be able to take the principles and the things that he was talking about and apply it to my business. It took a little bit more maturity and just context to be able to reframe some of the principles in this book to be able to better help me. One of the things that I love about this book is how he outsources and how he uses VAs and just a creative way of using his time in a more productive fashion, which takes me to my life lesson from this book, which is leverage everything. The 12th book, which I'm excited to announce, is my personal book. Don't get too excited. I'm not finished with it. It's still going to be a bit before it's ready. But the name of the book is I'm excited to write this book and share this book. The idea behind the book is we're going to talk about success through the eyes of a dyslexic. We're also going to talk about success through hardships. My upbringing wasn't as bad as some and not as good as others. And so I'm really excited to share what that process looks like, being raised by a single mother, starting a family, pursuing success, embracing a level of success, and what it looks like to do that in business and do that with dyslexia. That book will be coming out. And the life principle of that book is, I really enjoyed making this video. I hope you enjoyed watching it. We'll see you on the next one.